his younger brother who was swept away by huge waves whipped up by the typhoon. The younger brother, aged 25, survived with serious injuries. A firefighter was also injured during the incident.
Typhoons are dangerous. Stay safe and stay indoors.
Taxis racing.
Sorry about that.
Free runners and a bike in a building. A red car airborne.
I just went airborne there.
And a car that makes you look ugly in it. Monday, Top Gear, Season 20, at 9:35 on Pearl.
It was 20 years ago. Ever since, time has never been so magical.
The time now is 11:40. The time check was brought to you by Chopin.
Anti-Chinese rioting in Vietnam spreads to a central province. Democratic Party leaves the Alliance for True Democracy, and two disasters hit California hard. Good evening. Hong Kong has raised the travel alert for Vietnam to red as anti-Chinese protests spread to Ha Tinh province in the central part of the country. A mob stormed a Taiwanese-owned steel mill overnight, leaving a reported 21 people dead, including 16 Chinese nationals and about 90 others injured. A spokeswoman for the Foreign Ministry in Beijing has urged Vietnamese authorities to punish the rioters and compensate the victims. Jenny Lam reports.
Chinese-owned businesses in Vietnam continue to be the targets of people angry with Beijing's deployment of an oil rig in disputed waters in the South China Sea. Overnight, an estimated 1,000 people stormed a steel mill owned by Taiwan's Formosa Plastics Group. Taiwan's representative in Vietnam said rioters set fire to several buildings and hunted down the Chinese workers. The unrest lasted till this morning. Reuters reported that more than 100 people were rushed to hospitals, and of the 21 people who died, 16 were Chinese. The riots started on Tuesday in Binh Dong and Dong Nai provinces north of Ho Chi Minh City in the south. There are more than 30,000 Taiwanese businessmen in the three provinces affected by the unrest. The mobs torched Chinese-owned as well as Korean-owned factories, leaving behind a sea of devastation. Hundreds of people were arrested. Relative calm returned to Binh Dong today, and some of the factories are hoping to restart their production lines. Some Taiwanese businessmen, though, are not taking their chances. Many have crossed over into neighboring Cambodia. Taiwan's China Airlines is putting on extra flights out of Vietnam to bring people to safety. This man was at the airport today. He and his colleagues hid in a room while the rioters beat people up at random with batons. This man disguised himself by wearing clothing normally worn by Vietnamese workers in order to get out. In Ho Chi Minh City, a Taiwanese school is providing shelter for Taiwanese people who have fled the riotous provinces. The school principal says they are gradually bringing people to the airport so they can leave the country. This man says people from the Chinese mainland do not dare to travel by road to Ho Chi Minh City because they know they are the rioters' targets. One Hong Kong businessman told TVB News over the phone that Vietnamese authorities have beefed up security in Ho Chi Minh City. Police are now guarding some of the industrial areas, but authorities have advised them not to reopen their factories for the time being. Some of those who fled Vietnam arrived in Hong Kong today. This man says he has yet to count his losses, but was just too glad that he had got out safely. This person saw his office smashed up and all the windows shattered. According to the Travel Industry Council, about 20 Hong Kong tour groups are in Vietnam, most of them in Ho Chi Minh City or Hanoi. About 900 people are scheduled to go there over the coming week. The Immigration Department is reminding all travellers to Vietnam to be on alert on the latest development there and avoid crowded areas in case of further violence. Jenny Lam, TVB News.
Financial Secretary John Zhang warned that many government departments would run out of money soon if legislators continue to delay the budget over the filibuster. But as Rani Samtani reports, some lawmakers believe Zhang is using scare tactics to end the filibuster.
After meeting with more than 150 officials from 80 government departments this morning, Financial Secretary John Zhang said that funding for the Hospital Authority, the University Grants Committee, and the Legislative Council Commission would be suspended in June. The secretary said he hopes to pool together $5.1 billion to keep other core public services afloat. LegCo President Zhang Yoxing said the Secretariat has enough reserve funds to cope for 3 months, but this does not include salaries and office expenses of members.
We know that there may be difficulty in the government financing if the appropriation bill is not passed in due course, within the end of this month, for example.
People Power lawmaker Albert Chan accused the financial secretary of scaremongering to end the filibuster. Chan said if any senior government officials have problems with finances, they need to find a solution. They can apply for emergency funding and LegCo will arrange it, said Chan. But Zhang ruled out applying for temporary funding from LegCo as he said it would continue ignoring the problem. He insisted that he wasn't using scare tactics to turn the public against the filibustering lawmakers.
What we are doing is to present the facts, deal with our colleagues in the different departments to let them know what the situation is, so that they would work with us.
Zhang said more than 60 departments will see their reserve funds dry up within June. He reiterated that the only solution is for lawmakers to end the filibuster as soon as possible. Rani Samtani, TVB News.
The Democratic Party will leave the Alliance for True Democracy after a public referendum is held on June 22nd. Tonight, party chairwoman Emily Lau announced that trust in the group was broken. That's after People Power and the League of Social Democrats refused to support the Alliance's political reform proposal at an Occupy Central Deliberation Day earlier this month. Lau said she felt the Alliance's mission will be completed after the Occupy Central public referendum next month. However, she pledged to continue supporting the Alliance's three-track proposal beyond June. The blueprint would see CE candidates in the 2017 election nominated by the public political parties as well as the nominating committee. Earlier today, the government rejected public and party nominations in the second round of consultations on political reform.
The slogan for the public consultation on constitutional reform is "Let's talk and achieve universal suffrage." But today officials are effectively saying let's not talk about public nomination anymore. The Occupy Central movement has chosen 3 constitutional reform proposals to be put to a civil referendum next month. All 3 proposals involve public nomination of candidates for the chief executive election in 2017. But Chief Secretary for Administration Carrie Lam says public nomination is legally controversial, lacks political consensus and will be difficult to implement. So, none of those proposals will go through to round 2 of the public consultation, she adds, because there is no reason to put forward plans that do not comply with the Basic Law and the decisions of the National People's Congress Standing Committee. The Occupy Central movement plans to hold a civil referendum on June 22nd to select a reform proposal that it will eventually push for. But Secretary for Justice Rimsky-Yoon says public support will not make legal ideas that are unconstitutional. He warns that he will not tolerate anyone who tries to use politics or public opinion as excuses to break the law. But legislator and Civic Party leader Alan Leung disagrees with the notion that public nomination of CE candidates is strictly a question of law.
How to do the 2017 election is mainly a political question to be answered by those in power.
He warned that excluding public nomination from the second round of consultation will not put an end to the hopes of the Hong Kong people.
It is not an end to the public's crave for a real choice and true democracy in 2017 in the election of chief executive.
Leung leaves a challenge to the local and the central governments to come up with a proposal that excludes public nomination of CE candidates while achieving consensus among the public.
Secretary for Justice Rimsky-Yoon is taking a step-by-step approach on whether to fully disclose the report into the Lama Ferry disaster. Yoon said tonight that lawmakers could get a look at the whole report under restricted conditions. But Yoon will wait until civil legal proceedings are underway before deciding on whether to give access to the victims' families. Legislator James Stowe, who's representing them, sees a willingness to compromise in the government's offer.
We put forward the proposal that perhaps the best way is for the commencement of legal proceedings to be taken by the family members, and then once the legal proceedings are commenced, then the questions of discovery of the investigation report can be properly dealt with. Insofar as LegCo is concerned, we respect the role of the legislative councillor. We would be basically dealing with the questions by proposing them to sign an undertaking of confidentiality, and then the report will be provided to, or copies of the report will be provided to the LegCo secretariat or some other designated stakeholder, so that LegCo members can read them on a certain sort of at a certain premises.
We still want the government to disclose the report without any confidentiality imposition. However, because the Secretary for Justice created a new way and begged us to consider with our lawyer. Of course, we will not say no right at this moment, but we will have a very frequent meeting with our lawyers and with the DOJ, so that to make a final decision whether we accept this so-called concession or compromise way of looking at the report.
Anti-government protesters in Thailand stormed a military compound in Bangkok today, disrupting a key meeting on the fate of July elections. That followed an overnight attack on protesters, which left 3 people dead and more than 20 others injured. Alan Bookney reports.
Caretaker Prime Minister Nitwatumrong Bunsongpasan was meeting with the Election Commission at an Air Force academy on the outskirts of Bangkok. They were discussing whether elections can be held on July 20th or need to be delayed because of the political conflict. He selected the location to avoid the mass demonstrations seen in Bangkok's core. It didn't work, as hundreds of protesters streamed through a side entrance, forcing the gathered ministers to leave. The election commissioner said they may hold the next meeting via teleconference. The protesters are opposed to any election which they feel they almost certainly cannot win. They want the Senate and courts to install a neutral prime minister to oversee political reform before any election is held. The government says that would be tantamount to a judicial coup. The crisis deepened last week when the country's constitutional court removed caretaker Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra from office, ruling she'd abused her power. But her caretaker administration remains in office, angering the anti-government movement. And in the latest violence, 3 people were killed and more than 20 others were injured in an overnight attack on protesters camped out near Bangkok's Democracy Monument. At least 3 grenades were detonated, and machine guns were fired at protesters in the small encampment. It was the most serious incident since February, when 5 people were killed as police made their most determined effort to clear the demonstrators. 6 months of protests and sporadic violence have threatened to tip the Thai economy into recession and have raised fears of civil war. Alan Bookney, TVB News.
The U.S. state of California is grappling with 2 disasters at present: a massive crude oil spill and wildfires burning out of control. Sonia Artero reports.
Close to 200,000 liters of crude oil spilled over a large swath of Los Angeles due to a break in an above-ground pipeline. No injuries were reported, but the situation is so bad that some fire officials are describing the oil spill as being knee-high in some areas. The break was near San Fernando Road in Atwater Village. Once the oil began spilling onto the streets, authorities shut off the pipeline remotely. 4 people at a nearby business were evacuated with respiratory complaints, and 2 people were transferred to a hospital. The cleanup is now underway. In the county of